Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I want to talk about the pleasures and pitfalls of reading long books. The subject of long books is one that's been playing on my mind a bit recently after reading this book, Flicker, by Theodore Roszak, which is a book of nearly 700 pages. And it's a book I found that I just completely lost myself in when I was reading it. I really enjoyed the experience of being immersed in this novel for a period of time. I read it over the course of about a week, and that's a lot longer than it normally takes me to read a book. And I found during that week I was constantly thinking about this book. And I think that's partly because of the nature of the book, because it was a book that fascinated me. But I also think it's because of the length of the book and the fact that it took me a week to read it. So I had time, in the evenings and during the day when I wasn't reading the book to reflect on it. And that's not something that necessarily happens when you're reading a shorter book. I typically read books that are, around the 250 page mark. And those are books that I can usually read in a day or just over a day. And when you read a book that quickly, it doesn't sit with you as long because you are, you know how the book turns out pretty quickly. Whereas a book like Flicker, which took me a longer time to read, I was constantly wondering, what's going to happen next. And that's just something that doesn't happen when you read a shorter book. So I've kind of been thinking about that recently and reflecting on my own history of reading. And certainly when I was younger, I used to read a lot more long books. In fact, when I was at university, I had a reputation for reading what my friends used to call fat crap books. So, big blockbuster type books by people like Tom Clancy. I'm going to do a video probably tomorrow where I talk about the 10 longest books that I've read. And when I went through that list, I realised that the vast majority of them were books I read a long time ago, kind of when I was in my 20s. So yeah, I've definitely gravitated away from reading long books as I've got older. I still read them occasionally. I've read Flicker. I also have finished the Dark Tower series by Stephen King recently, which had some very long books in it. And I also read the book The Kindly Ones by Jonathan Littell recently, which again was a really long book. And again, like Flicker, I enjoyed with that the experience of being immersed in the world of that book for an extended period of time. I do think, though, the obvious trade-off between that experience and the pleasure of reading shorter books is you can read more shorter books. When I think of, two of my favourite authors, Stephen King and Ed McBain. So this is a Stephen King book I've grabbed off the shelf, Lucy's Story, which is that thick. This is an Ed McBain book, Ghost, which is wrong way around, that thick. So I can read a lot of McBains for every Stephen King, and I will get an equal amount of pleasure probably out of both experiences. So there's definitely a trade-off there, and it's something that's probably something that I consider a bit more as a someone who's got a BookTube channel, in that I have to have books to talk about on the channel. So I can't spend all of my time reading really long books because I wouldn't have enough books to talk about with all of you. So for me, shorter books are a good way of getting through books quickly so that I have more things to talk about. And I also really enjoy them. I enjoy the pleasure of a book that you can read in one sitting, a book where you get completely immersed in the book for a short period of time, and it just the narrative just pulls you through the book. That's the kind of book I really enjoy reading. Things like mystery novels where you're immediately gripped by the mystery, by trying to figure out what has gone on, who done it. And mystery novels often tend to be shorter. That McBain book that I showed is a mystery novel. I think that the best length for a mystery novel is below 250 pages. I think mystery novels that are longer than that really have to justify themselves to the reader in a way that other kinds of long books don't. So, I've talked about Stephen King. The other kind of book that is often long is that kind of epic fantasy or epic historical novel where what the author is doing is building up a picture of a different world, be that a world from the past or a different world completely, and that can take time to do. And part of the pleasure of reading a book like that is in losing yourself as a reader in that different world. So I think long books of that kind do justify themselves. But as I say, partly because of the channel and partly because as I get older, I find myself thinking maybe somewhat morbidly about the fact that I don't have that many reading years left. I've not done the sums, but I'm 51, so I'd probably, maybe I've got 30 years left in me, maybe less than that, who knows. That's arguably not that many books. So, and I am someone who enjoys the experience of reading stories in their entirety, of that, complete end-to-end experience. And the more of those complete end-to-end experiences I can fit into the rest of my life, the better. So I'm not exclusively going to read short books, but I do find myself thinking more when I consider picking up a long book than I would if that book were shorter. I think to myself, is this going to be worth the investment of time that I need to put into it? I remember my granddad in the later years of his life used to joke that he wasn't going to start any long books in case he didn't get to finish them. And I'm certainly not quite at that stage yet, but it is something I think about. I do think about, can I justify, spending a week reading this book when in that time I could read 4 or 5 shorter books? And I'm interested to hear how other people fall on that kind of spectrum. Are you someone who loves reading longer books because you enjoy that experience of being immersed in a world for a period of time? Or are you more like me? Do you prefer getting through as many stories as possible, and therefore gravitate to shorter books? Do let me know in the comments what you think. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.